Thanks for bringing me back to the Marine Corps. A short story by Tom Kane. A World War II veteran's 100th birthday party. This is a love story. Not in the biblical sense, but rather the mysterious bond that formed between two old veteran Marines. It began by happenstance in 2021 in an assisted living facility that my wife, Judy, and I moved into after her illness became too much for me to handle alone. We moved into the facility in Palm Beach Gardens in September of 2021. Judy and I were included in the existing veterans group by the social director. Naturally, I gravitated to the two Marines who were already in residence. Amongst the group was an affable but quiet veteran from St. Louis, Missouri. His name was Bob and was 97 years young at the time. He could have passed for 75. As is my usual habit, I pumped Bob for his story, his Marine service in particular. It was like root canal work. Bob had little interest in sharing that part of his life with me, or anyone else. Finally, after some prompting, the social director, whose son was a career Navy warrant officer, offered to host a small Marine Corps birthday party for our group on November 10th. For the event, I invited a small contingent of active duty Marines to join us in the festivities. With the young Marines at the table, the hook was set for Bob's reintroduction to his long-forgotten Corps. It was then that I started to piece together the service time of Corporal Robert Reichman, USMC 42-46, and the Marine Corps. Bob had enlisted in the Corps in March 1942 when he turned 18. After boot camp in San Diego and Camp Pendleton, Bob headed to the Southwestern Pacific. His first stop was Guadalcanal in late 1942 into 1943. After a brief rest in Australia, his next campaign was the invasion of Bougainville in late 1943 with the 3rd Marine Division. In mid-1944, after the Bougainville campaign, Bob's unit returned to Hawaii. He was 20 years old and a veteran of two major campaigns. In December of 1944, Bob headed west for the invasion of Iwo Jima on February 19, 1945. Bob's unit went ashore in the 3rd wave on the fateful day. He described to me how the first two waves of Marines had met significant resistance, and when he landed, there were bodies and body parts scattered in the water and on the beach. His unit moved inland and was engaged in combat from that point forward. He offered that he had been wounded in the leg and been evacuated to the beach. He told me when he got to the beach, as he lay there on a stretcher, he noticed the flag up on Mount Suribachi. He then dozed off, and when he awoke, the flag was gone. He thought that the Marines had lost the mountain, and his heart sank. Then a short time later, he witnessed the second, more famous flag being raised back up on the mountaintop. In December 2021, I lost Judy, my wife of 60 years. I decided to remain at the living facility for the time being. It was during the next 4 months that Bob and I became close friends. I needed a buddy, and Bob was an inspiration to me. At one point, he shared that he had gotten his Purple Heart in the mail, months after the war. It was then I decided to assemble a complete set of service ribbons for Bob and presented them to him on Memorial Day, 2022. I moved out of the living facility in June 2022 and bought a condo in Jupiter, about 10 minutes away from Bob. From then until his passing on October 22, 2024, We had lunch every week and spoke on the phones 1 to 2 times per week. The weeks and months went by quickly. Bob was facing his 100th birthday on March 19, 2024. In mid-February, I was having lunch with Bob. I told him casually that I was going to throw a 100th birthday party for him. He looked at me and said, "I don't want an effing party." I looked in his eye and said, "I'm throwing an effing party. And it's not about you. It's about the 6,000 Marines who never came back from Iwo Jima." That did it. It ended the conversation. There would be a party. A week later, we were having our usual lunch, and out of the blue, Bob states, "21st birthdays are pretty important, aren't they?" I didn't have a clue where he was coming from, but responded, "Yeah, why?" Bob: "You know, Tom, it was the night of March 18th, and I was in my foxhole on Iwo. I had lost my best friend and foxhole mate to a mortar shell that also wounded me in the leg. As I huddled there bleeding, I was wondering whether if I'd ever make my 21st birthday at midnight. I was stunned and my eyes filled with tears." He continued, "You know, I've waited 79 years for my 21st birthday." When I regained my composure, I assured Bob that we'd correct that situation in March. As I pulled the plans together for March 19th, I decided to share his story with General Jim Amos, the 35th Commandant of the Marine Corps. I phoned Jim and relayed the story of my friend Bob Reishman and asked if he would be the guest of honor at Bob's birthday party. In an hour, Gen Amos called back and said he and his charming wife Bonnie would make the journey down from Charlotte to honor Bob. 2 days later, through the grapevine, Sergeant Major John Estrada, RET, heard that his former boss, General Amos, was coming to Jupiter and called me to ask for an invitation to the event. The next call was from Major Greg Mateo, a friend and head of the recruiting district, who informed me that he had the Marine Corps band from Cherry Point at his disposal that week and would make them available for Bob's party. Although we tinkered with an F-18 flyby, General Amos convinced me the noise could be problematic. Instead, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office gave us a helicopter flyby. With that array of dignitaries and talent lined up, we managed to sell over 100 tickets at $100 apiece and hosted Bob's family and 25 Marines for the dinner. In all, there were 160 in attendance to honor Bob. We raised over $7,000 for a local charity that supports active duty Marines overseas. The dinner went well. I did the introductions and then turned it over to Jen Amos, who hosted the evening along with Bonnie. When it got to the traditional cake-cutting ceremony, Jim Amos presented Bob with 2 large cakes. One celebrated his 100th birthday, and the other his 21st birthday, as I promised him a month before. As Jim recounted the story, there wasn't a dry eye in the club. The Marine Band's performance and after-dinner dancing music was a big success. The party boy was on the dance floor. In the weeks and months after the party, Bob became increasingly tired. He would tell me that he wanted to move on. His time had come. I responded by trying to lift his spirits, and we even moved him to a better living location. He was on a downward trajectory. Bob settled into the St. Joseph's assisted care facility with ease. He had a beautiful apartment. However, his mind was set, and it was just a matter of time until he finally surrendered. In late October, I called several times, usually between 9 and 10 p.m., after his evening nap. There was no answer or callback. On the Friday evening, I received a phone call that Bob was in Jupiter Medical Center, room 313. I headed over immediately and visited him. He was in a deep sleep, so I decided to let him sleep and came back early Saturday morning when he was awake. We talked for about an hour as he drifted in and out of lucidity. I thought he was on a way to recovery until I returned that evening when he had relapsed. The same condition was evident on Sunday and Monday. It was on my visit Sunday evening when he suddenly awoke, looked at me and said clearly, "Tom, thanks for bringing me back to the Marine Corps." He then closed his eyes, and it was the last words he ever uttered to me. I was in tears as I knew he had surrendered the fight to live any longer. On Monday, I got a call from Cindy who asked that I join TJ Moore at the hospital to commit Bob to their hospice unit. I agreed with the decision and spent some time alone with Bob in his room. He never spoke. Two hours later, they moved him, and I went home, expecting to visit the hospice unit in the morning. When I entered the unit on Tuesday morning and asked for Bob's room, I was informed that he had passed during the early morning hours. I was stunned, but not surprised. It was a merciful ending for a great friend of mine, and an inspiration to all who knew him. I called the Commandant, General Jim Amos, to share my grief. His words were a final tribute. Looks like another Marine has now been posted to guard heaven. Semper Fi, my friend. Tom Kane, Captain, U.S. Marine Corps 1961 to 1966.